New emails and new records are painting a very different picture of President Biden's involvement in Hunter's business deals. It's very different than what the administration's been telling us. New visitor logs reveal 8 more White House meetings between then Vice President Biden and Hunter's business partner. That makes the total 27 times, and that's what we know. We're also learning the president reportedly agreed to pay more than $800,000 to cover, part of which was Hunter Biden's legal bills. That was ahead of the 2020 election. And financial records reportedly show the president himself had $5.2 million in unexplained income. But remember, Biden has repeatedly denied any knowledge of his son's business dealings.
How many times have you ever spoken to your son about his overseas business dealings?
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings. I have never discussed with my son or my brother or anyone else anything having to do with their businesses, period.
Do you think it was wrong for him to take that position?
No.
Knowing that it was really because that company wanted access to you?
Well, that's not true. You're saying things you do not know what you're talking about. No one said that. Who said that?
Every single day, the evidence mounts, literally every single day. Douglas Murray, take a look at this email, January 17th, 2019. This is then Hunter Biden's personal assistant. He wrote to an accountant. She did, rather. And here's what she wrote. Hello, VP team. I spoke with Hunter today regarding his bills. It is my understanding that Hunt's dad will cover these bills in the short term as Hunter transitions in his career. I have a list of the current bills of which I am aware. I've attached the list. In that attachment is a $28,000 payment for legal bills for restructuring of BHR Partners, which is the Chinese equity firm that was the linchpin of that foreign deal that Hunter did. So we're just to believe that President Biden, well, then Vice President Biden, as he left office, never asked his son, hey, what is this about?
We have to believe at the moment that whenever the Biden family got together, Vice President then Biden just held forth, monologued. It's possible that he just, shot the breeze and just, said whatever on his mind, maybe talked about his exploits as a young man, never asked any of his family any questions, never said, hey, Hunter, are you earning any money at the moment? Are you perhaps sitting on a board in a country you don't know, in a business you know nothing about, earning hundreds of thousands of dollars a year? You're doing that by any chance? But maybe he never asked his son anything. Maybe he never asked his brother anything. Maybe the whole thing was just one big Joe Biden monologue. But you know what? I doubt it.
Right.
I really doubt it.
I doubt it, too. So he never asked when he was at that Cafe Milano dinner with some of the business individuals Hunter was dealing with. He never asked during the golf outing with Hunter. Never asked. Wow. Emily, then you look at this income situation. So basically, on his tax return, then Vice President Biden disclosed $7 million more on his tax returns, this is according to the Daily Mail, than he did on his government disclosure form. Some of that's made up for by Jill Biden's income, but it still leaves a deficit of about $5.2 million. Where did it go?
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so first of all, the endless Biden monologue to me sounds like a fresh layer of Dante's Inferno. I just have to say that. But I'm sure, Shannon, as I'm sure you know as well, look, I've seen our tax dollars used to prosecute $30,000 of alleged tax income evasion. I have seen personally as pairs of criminal division IRS agents use our tax dollars to fly around the country, interviewing family members to secure one count of tax evasion. Believe me, there is no limit to the dollars that this government will spend of our money to claw $1 back of its perceived lost income. And I'm sure many people watching from home have had IRS note discrepancies on their returns of less than $1,000. So the allegation, the fact that our sitting president somehow had a discrepancy of $7 million between the tax returns and the government transparency reports, $5.2 million of which is unaccounted for in terms of its source of income, is absolutely mind-boggling. And I hope that they spend our tax dollars, maybe just $1, toward ascertaining where it came from.
It'd be great, right? And meanwhile, you have these meetings, Harris, these 27 meetings now it is.
27.
Rosemont Seneca, Eric Schwerin, he's the head of it. He's the closest business associate of Hunter. He's going to the West Wing. Why?
Well, I think we, have a lot of people that we can ask, including the former chief of staff, which makes this really complicated because he's in the current White House.
Right.
Right? And I saw him on the scroll. And part of the problem, too, is that with those people in those meetings along with the Bidens, you have to justify the People's House's time. I mean,
Yes.
seriously,
Yes.
you can't just get a meeting in the White House. You know, you've worked in it. So now I want to know a little bit more, if possible, about the context of their roles with all of this. Were there note takers in those meetings? And what do those people know about the business dealings? And when your child racks up $800,000 in legal bills and you don't ask, I agree. I mean, you don't ask where are you getting your income from when I have to be responsible for nearly $1 million in legal bills? Remember, there's 150 or so transactions, banking transactions, that investigators earlier on had already started to take a look at. Was that part of it?
Right.
I mean, the public deserves to know, but as a parent, if I'm going to pay your bills and you're like an older dude all over YouTube with well, we can't even talk about it, what he's doing, but most of the time he's naked. If I'm going to pay your bills, I need to know, well, where is your money going and where's your money coming from? Yeah. I completely don't believe that they didn't talk about it in some way, shape, or form, even if it were just an admonishment from the parent.
Yes, exactly. And that brings us to the topic of a special counsel, which we know Merrick Garland was asked about yesterday, the Attorney General. He didn't give an answer one way or the other. But Shannon, I want to play two sound bites recently from the White House, the press secretary and the chief of staff.
Of course, the president's confident that his son didn't break the law. But most importantly, as I said, that's a matter that's going to be decided by the Justice Department, by the legal process. It's something that no one at the White House has involvement in.
I think it's broadly known and widely known, Peter, that there was a broad range of Russian disinformation back in 2020.
I mean, the executive branch has made their view clear on this from the beginning. They've changed a little bit recently, but Shannon, it seems untenable that there would not be a special prosecutor of some sort.
Well, yeah, and the Attorney General was asked about that yesterday, and he keeps referring back to the point that there is an investigation going on with an attorney who was obviously part of the previous administration. He was a holdover, so he's been allowed to continue on. They say without any interference, he's going to continue to dig to the bottom of these. But the White House is going to have a hard time, I think, continuing with these exact denials that they're making. Jen Psaki yesterday referring to these visitors' logs and saying that's stuff from more than 10 years ago. The president stands by what he says, but then our new reporting, as you said, 8 new visits in 2016. That's much more recent. And as Harris said, there are going to be people who can answer those questions. Either they were parties to the meeting, they had some knowledge of what was going on in those meetings, and we deserve an explanation. I keep thinking if the last name was Trump, I think all of this would be handled differently.
Yeah.
And we should demand the same thing, regardless of party, if we think there's any potential for wrongdoing. And using a government office is at the highest level potentially for personal benefit. Whether the last name is Biden or Trump, we should get answers.
That is certainly true.
That is very fair.
Yeah.
Douglas, I've got to get this last point in. A Hunter Biden email, just a bit of intrigue attained by Fox News Digital. He's not a fan of the Clintons at all. He said Bill Clinton, I can't repeat it on air, but called him a bleep.
Oh.
And said he looks like bleep. And he called Doug Band and Huma Abedin, 2 Clinton aides, greedy. Ironic, Hunter Biden would use
strange,
that, calling them petty, greedy, venal, and low rent for taking a private sector money when they were in government.
I'm horrified to discover there's dissent at the top of the Democratic Party, but at least we know that Hunter does have some skills. He can paint. Remember, he after everything else has gone, he can paint and sell his paintings for hundreds of thousands of dollars, despite not being able to do that really either.
That is a great point. A lot of ethical issues there.
Yeah.
Look, it's just my view. Hunter Biden, don't point ethical fingers. You've got a lot of fingers pointing back at you.
Sure.